Hi, I created a place-based lesson for social studies in kindergarten. Um, we're going to be really focusing on seasons and my neighborhood. Also working on that sense of self for kindergarten, kind of working with the senses, what it looks like, how it smells, what it feels like, those kind of things. So my central question is, what observations can I make about weather changes in the fall? Um, and my objectives are students will be able to ask questions and draw conclusions about the season fall, and students will be able to make observations about weather patterns over time, because that's kind of tying it back to a science standard I included about use and share observations of local weather conditions to describe patterns over time. So for this particular lesson, we'd be looking at that in the season of fall and what kind of changes we're seeing, what observations we notice as we make that transition from summer to fall. So at the beginning of my lesson plan, I have kind of what we would be doing before this lesson. So kind of put that we'd be working with seasons. We probably would have talked about it before, particularly fall, like it's coming up. That's when you start school, and a little later in the fall is when we see changes in the trees and stuff. So that's when I would want to do this lesson particularly. I imagine in my classroom I want to do something about like each day when we have circle time or calendar time, we would talk about the weather and kind of what we're observing. And so hopefully that will not be a new concept to them. It will be something that we've kind of talked about and hopefully observed each day. So for this lesson, we'll dive a little deeper into some of the changes that we might start seeing as the season gets more in depth. And we'll be taking a nature walk around the school neighborhood. I'm not completely sure what the area of St. George looks like yet, so I'd kind of have to plan out our route when I got there or whatever school I was teaching in, but I plan to keep it something pretty centrally located. And then we'd either stop on the playground or a little park area, and probably I'll talk about this later in lesson 2 about do a little scavenger hunt with finding different leaves and objects. Um, so the first part of the lesson kind of talks about the logistics. So we go over travel, like lining up, how we're going to walk, are we going to have a buddy system, how we will do crossing the street, am I going to have students go so far and stop at that telephone pole, or how are we going to do that? Would definitely need to be thought through and talked about once I was able to confirm the route and kind of how the area looks. Before we go, we'd also talk about behaviors such as voice level, should we be talking when we're walking, those kind of things, how we need to act in a line, we need to stay together, and what we'll be doing when we get to either the park or the playground or some kind of open area. We'll also address resources, so what do we need to bring with us for this particular lesson. That will look like just having a clipboard probably with the list of materials to find, and we'll only need one of those per partner group. And then maybe they could each have a little bag or something to put the things they find, because we will be bringing them back and kind of talking about them at the end of our walk. Another thing to think about with logistics is the personnel. So will I have extra support, pairs present, and also before we do this walk, a week or two before, I would want to send home a parent letter or permission slip, depending on how that looked like, and just let them know that we'll be doing that, so it's not a surprise. So the first part of the lesson, I want to start by, I always start my lessons by informing the students what we're going to be doing. I think that's really good. I don't want there to be any surprises. I want them to know exactly what to expect. And then I want to start this lesson with a KWL chart. I think that's really important just to look over or to think about and spark discussion about like what we know, what we want to know, and then at the end it kind of ties it all back together and we talk about what we learned. So I'd want to do that, and then we'll be reading a book. Then the next part is when we will be going on our nature walk. So again, I would have to talk about all those expectations before we would go as a class, and then we would go on our walk, and that would look like I would want students just observing and kind of taking it in as we walk, and then our kind of final destination will be stopping at a park or the playground or an open area to do our scavenger hunt. And again, before I would let them go do that, I would definitely walk through expectations again of like how far they could go, kind of need to stay in a certain area, and we would go through what they need to collect because I know a lot struggle with reading still. I also would make that handout pretty color coded or friendly because they need to find things like a red leaf, a yellow leaf, a green leaf, a leaf with points, just a couple different things, and then that way we can talk about that when we get back to the classroom. So then after our nature walk, we would come back to the room, and I would want them together on the carpet, and I kind of want to just go over like what we saw, what we noticed, what we observed, talk about our different senses, the sight, sound, smells, what it feels like, and then we will record that on the board and kind of talk about those things, and then lastly I would wrap it up with what we learned on the section of our KWL chart. Thanks.